We are now on the second Chelek, which is the second section of the Ramchal and Derech Hashem, and we are in now Perek Hamishi, which is the fifth Perek. And what he's going to talk about in this Perek chapter is how, basically, he's going to talk about God's supervision of the world. And there are certain different aspects to that supervision, in terms of what does God supervise? What's it based on, his supervision? And also, when God decides to act, what does he do? How does he act? You see. So those are the two ideas. That God supervises, or what we can call actually, God surveils the universe, which means that he's always looking over, constantly, he's always looking over in terms of what's happening, what's occurring to the entire creation. Because God never diverts his attention. It's not like he takes vacation, and leaves it up to he appoints some designated under secretary, and so on, So there's always a 24/7 perspective, look, and examination of the entire creation. It's important to know because that always happens. The second thing, which is always very important, is we don't realize how single-minded God is in terms of what he wants. There's never a let-up in terms of that God says, well, who cares really what's going on? I'll let my guard down, so to speak. God is interested in only one thing, ultimately. And it never ceases. And what is that? What he's always interested in is what's called the tikkun of the bria. Can you, thank you. He's always interested in the tikkun of the bria, which means the rectification of the creation. He never ceases from that. And everything he does in some way reflects that goal. And that goal is a 24/7 mindset. Never stops. You see? So we're not looking here in any way at a vacation, some type of cessation of that, agenda. That agenda is always there, always, 24/7. And that's exactly the way, which causes really, when you think about it, the acts of God. You see, so in a certain sense, God is always, in a certain sense, he creates, then he maintains or sustains the creation. That's the second thing. And then after that, God is always, he gives everybody the energy and the ability to act based on free will, you see. And then he's always evaluating the behavior. Never stops. There's always, you can want to call it a judgment, maybe an evaluation is a better term, but he's always determining what exactly is the significance of what I just observed. That never stops. And therefore, there's always a judgment, some type of an evaluation. And based on that evaluation, God will decide what to do based on the direction in terms of the tikkun, the rectification of the universe. It never stops. It's almost, you can actually consider it, it's an absolute law that what God does. So that's important to keep in mind, that God is always watching and looking, supervising, surveilling creation. Always with that in mind, you see. So that's a very important idea that there is never a cessation to that providence, to that supervision. Never. So, the question is, in what sense does he do that? Now, what's important to know is this, and this in many ways forms the basis of the whole concept of hashgacha, or a supervision or direction of the creation itself. God knows everything, literally. It's hard to understand what that means, but what do I mean by everything, Imagine that God knows the position of every grain on the planet Earth. Do you know how many grains of sand there are on planet Earth? There's a lot, right? Yet he knows the existence and the aspect of every grain on the entire planet, which is astounding, And he's aware of it, what's called 24/7, always aware. And that's just the grains of sand, He's also aware of everything, all the people, right? What they do, all their thoughts, everything, every fact, But what's also interesting, if he asks yourself, how many atoms are there in the universe? So not only is he aware of every grain of sand, every person, and so on, but he's also aware of every atom in the universe, where the electrons are at any given instant in time. You see? Now we're talking about information that borders almost on infinity. It's astounding. It's astounding how God can even keep that in his mind. Forget about how to know this, I mean, we go crazy if we got to remember a shopping list, right? You got a shopping list, you go out of your mind, go shopping with 15 items, you go out of your crazy, you got to go this, all that, all, We can't even keep 15 items, right? In our mind, we got to have a whole list, and so on, Yet God has the knowledge of where every single electron is in the atom of that particular atom. He knows it all. So obviously we're dealing with a being that has a complete understanding and comprehension for all existence. Okay, so he's not ignorant of anything. That's called omniscient. He's omniscient, means he knows all, you see. And therefore, now what's interesting is not only he knows all at the present, he knows everything that was, is, and will be. Everything. Long before anything ever happens. In other words, when he brought everything into creation, right, into existence, right, he knew everything that would ever come out of this. Every thought, every idea, this is what he knew. There's no such thing that God was restricted to time. Now, God does not exist in time that he should know what was, is, and what will be. Now, we don't understand what that means because we exist in time. What is time, if you think about that? Time is what's called duration of existence. Somehow existence durates. I don't know if that's a verb, but it durates in the sense that there's a duration of things, existence itself. So there what was, there what is now, and what will be. But time is the flow of this duration of existence, you see. And God does not exist in time. Therefore, it's not that everything is present to him. There's no time to him. So we don't know what that means. Why is there basically time? Because time allows for a separation of events. You see? In other words, God wants man to create his own Olam Haba. So obviously there's got to be a delay in events where he does something now, and then let's say at the end of his existence, whatever, then he gets either the future world or he doesn't get the future world. You see? So that clearly is a delay in what's called events. Well, that's time. You see? That's the passage of time. So therefore, God knows everything, whether it be past, present, or future. You see? And like I said, everything is known to him, every aspect. In other words, whatever is, he knows. That's the rule. Whatever is, he knows. Now we can ask ourselves, why is it so? Well, how is it so? You know? But if you think about it, what makes logic and sense is this. Because if God creates everything, right, and he has to maintain the existence, well, guess what? That means whatever exists has to be maintained or sustained. Who's the one who's sustaining it? God. He has to provide the existence of something to remain. You see? If he didn't know about everything, it wouldn't make a difference because it wouldn't exist. Because if he doesn't know about it, then he's not providing the existence of that, so obviously it doesn't exist. Therefore, everything is known to him because everything has to have that input where he says, be. You see? So if everything has to have that input, including an electron running around a nucleus of an atom, right? Because that also needs God input, well then he must know about that electron running around the atom. You see? So a key feature is that God is existence, and we all, or everything, and everything emanates from him, which means that God has to constantly input existence to everything, because if not, where would it get its existence from? You see? Therefore God obviously knows about everything. For that simple reason, you see? So therefore, everything is known to God. What is also interesting is something else. For instance, you know, like, how does God know anything? We know that he knows everything, but how does he know? And the answer is because nothing exists outside of God, really. Everything emerges from God. But in the end, even after it emerges from God, right, it's still God. But we don't understand how, you see. Nothing really exists outside of him, you see, and therefore we really were all identical in a certain sense. We are part of God, you see. So if that's the case, when we don't understand how that is, as it says, you know, everything is really part of God, because everything derives its existence from God and emerges from his being. So therefore, obviously, if everything emerges from his being, then God doesn't know something because he sees it. It's not that God has senses where he can see. God knows himself, and therefore he knows everything. God really, everything that is nothing more than self-knowledge. You see? That's really what it is. That's why he knows everything. In other words, how does he know that we're in this room and I'm giving a shiur? So most people think, well, he sees us, you know, from some invisible spot, some invisible place. But the answer is God doesn't know us because he's looking at us, because he's listening to the shiur. I hope he is, right? And I hope he's okay with it, right? But that's not how God knows about what's going on here. He knows it because he is us, or we is he, however you want to put it, right? God knows himself, and therefore he knows us. It's really all about self-knowledge, you see. And that's how he knows everything that is. These are very important ideas, you see. So therefore, you can't fool God because you are really part of him, you see. And therefore, how would he not know about you? You see. That's how God, in a certain sense, knows everything. Because it's all identical to him. The only problem is we have no idea of how we are separate. We do not understand how we are separate from him if we in fact emerge from him. And what's interesting is that even after the emergence, we're not really separate. These are mysteries of which we cannot know, and ultimately we cannot comprehend. For instance, where it says in the Novi, "Ve'ani lo shenisi," and I have never changed. That statement's incomprehensible. What do you mean you never changed? There's you before the creation, right? And then there's you after the creation. So you changed. There's something you didn't do before, and there's something that you did now. That's a change. You know what I'm saying? He changed in terms of his act. You know what I'm saying? So then the question is, how's that possible? God talks to, let's say, Avram Avinu, right? We have in this week's Parsha, the Moshe is talking to Avram Avinu, right? But what do you mean? God says, I never changed. It means I never really had a conversation with Avram. That's what it means. Because there's God before the conversation, and there's God during the conversation, and there's God after the conversation, right? That's clearly a behavioral change. So we could say, what do you mean? You changed your behavior, right? But when the Hashem says, Ani lo shenisi, that means, no, it's an illusion. Nothing happened at all. How do we understand that? We can't. It's beyond comprehension, because to know the answer to that is to know who God is, to understand his reality. We have absolutely no inkling of his reality. Now, I'm just giving you ideas, It's funny, we say that God is omnipresent. It means God fills all space. Yes? But the interesting thing about it is that God, right, doesn't occupy space. You see? Doesn't occupy space. And therefore, how could he fill space? He doesn't occupy it. God is not material, means he has no real substance. There's no substance at all. He doesn't exist in time. He doesn't exist in space. You see? But then the question is, if he doesn't exist in space, how does he occupy it all? We don't know. In other words, the type of being that God is, right, does not add up to our rules at all. He's a being that is outside the system, not part of it, yet he operates within the system by talking to people. God's interacting 24/7 for all the thousands of years of this Bria. Therefore, the bottom line is that God knows everything that was, is, will be. You see, that's a very important premise. You see. However, what's also important is that God interacts with us in time. We don't know how he does that. In other words, if you exist beyond time, where you have no time, then how do you interact with beings that exist in time? And what does that mean? How do you compare the two? You know what I'm saying? Unknown. It's in they have a fancy English word for it. That God is transcendent of all things, yet he is immanent. It's called immanent. Yet he is in all things, right? Because he's within the time frame of our world. Talks to people, judges people, everything, It's almost like he's always there with us, so we would assume that he's always in time. And we do not understand. How can you transcend everything and be ultimately or intimately involved with everything? We don't know. So these are important, what's called considerations, when you think about God and what he does. You see? Very important idea. Well, now that I've left you with all the information, that is just inconceivable, incomprehensible, we now become to understand that actually God supervises this world. He looks around and he sees everything. Now, what's important to know is God does not act based on who he is at all. You see? Because why does God have to judge us when he already knows what we're going to do? So what's this operation called judgment? He already knows everything, right? That has no difference when it was, when it is, when it will be. It's irrelevant, you know? It would be interesting that imagine that God knows what the future is down to the last nanosecond, you know? So it would be interesting if he would judge us based on what he knows, but we haven't done it yet, you see? So that itself is incomprehensible, you know? He can actually, by his foreknowledge, judge everything that we will do. Well, the interesting thing about it is that he could have judged everything at the instant of creation. He'd have to go through creation. Well, I know you're going to sin, you know, so let me judge you now. Whack. Or whatever he would do, right? I know you're going to do a mitzvah, right? Whenever that is, you know, in 2019, I know you're going to give tzedakah to some ani. Yes? Okay. And this is at the beginning of creation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to award you now. What do you mean now? I never did it. But it doesn't make a difference. I know you're going to do it. And his knowledge is as if it was done. You see, we don't know how to deal with this. You know what I'm saying? We can't, you know, because a guy can say, what are you going through the whole process of Olam Haba, of the future world? You might as well give it to me now. You didn't do anything yet. What's the difference? But you know I'm going to do it. And God's knowledge of what will be already is. So we can't comprehend that. What he knows already is or was, you know. So I can hear somebody saying in the great day of judgment, what do you mean? You knew I was going to get Olam Haba, so why did you give it to you then? Why do I have to struggle for this? You know, but then the question is, if you don't struggle, how could God know that it will be? You know, you can get all these kind of conundrums. Go figure out what's going on. It just shows you how impossible it is to deal with the Ribono Shel Olam based on his true nature. So therefore we have to understand, you know, as far as we're concerned, we have to say, okay, the Ribono Shel Olam is involved with us. He knows because he's got all these these monitors checking our behavior, you know, the video cameras, right? God got video cameras on everybody. He's checking us out all the time, but he really exists in our time. He's with us. He's past, present, and future. He just doesn't age. Looks good every day. What can you say, right? God looks young, energetic, looks great every day because he never ages, that's all. But he's got all these video cameras, you know, checking us out, and, you know, all these infrared cameras, and, you know, and so on and so forth. That's how we have to perceive God in that sense. But really, like I said, on the level of existence, we have no idea what in the world's going on. And that's going to become much more obvious as time goes on, because we're going to learn that God judges people with courts. And in the courts, we're going to see there are angels, and they're judging us, you see. And God has testimony. He's going to have some angels testifying to what we did, as we will see, you know. It's a real court of law. So, of course, the question is, what in the world's going on? What do you need it for? You know, they're not telling you anything you don't know, and so on, you know. But, you know, we don't really understand why God wants this whole setup. But that's what he employs, you see, as we will see. So, this is sort of like an introduction to the whole concept of hashgacha, providence or supervision. You know, how does it work and what does it really mean? So therefore, what I'm saying, therefore, which is very important, is that the Ribono Shel Olam, if he does decree something, whatever, then he does it without time frame. In other words, the decree will happen now, and not before or later. But wait a minute, to you there's no time, yet we have to ignore and disregard the way God is in and of himself, and how he interacts with the entire creation. It's a very important difference. So that's what he did. He creates a system which exists in time, in which he will be part of the system. Okay. So how does it work? So we know that we had before, a long time ago, that there are different types of beings, okay? And there are different types of dimensions or universes, you know. I mentioned there's the universe or the beings of what's called the spheres. Spheres are those emanations which God created, which are the initial emanations. Then there are angels, malachim. Then there are, and the spheres or the malachim are spiritual entities of which we have no concept, right? And then there are neshamas. Those are entities which are destined to go into a human body, whereas angels and certainly the divine emanations called the spheres are not. And then, of course, besides that, you also have the physical universe and so on. You know, many different types of beings and so on. So, the way God runs the universe, which we spoke about, you know, everything has a counterpart. What is a counterpart? In other words, everything that exists physically has a spiritual counterpart that really is that physical object or thing, but it's the root or the beginning of that physical thing. And all of these things, everything in creation has that counterpart. So you have the physical entity, whatever it is, you have its spiritual root, which really is its counterpart. It's an exact configuration of whatever it represents, and that whatever the object is ultimately emanates from that spiritual counterpart. Now, assigned to each physical thing, and therefore to the counterpart, is a malach, is an angel. Okay, that means everything in creation has some type of malach that is directing that spiritual counterpart. And those now, and therefore, and he's got, this malach has what's called the order sheet. He's got instructions. It's an instruction sheet, you see. And the malach follows that instruction sheet to the letter, precisely. In fact, the precision is mathematical, you see. And therefore, since he can manipulate the spiritual counterpart of the object, right? Then that spiritual counterpart, the way he configures that, automatically will reflect upon the actual physical object itself, which is the entire universe, really, you know. And like I say, the malach will do it, and it's a whole system of order. God orders it, and he tells them the exact instructions, and that's exactly what the malach does. Okay. The list of instructions is called nature. It is a specific list of how to behave physical objects. Now, the existence of the object is not from the malach. The existence of that object is from the spheres. You see, that's what gives rise to the existence both of the spiritual counterpart and also the object that emanates from that spiritual counterpart. You see? So that's what gives existence to everything. But what runs the show, so to speak, are the malachim. They are the ones that maneuver, operate everything that exists. And they follow their instruction sheet. And like I said, their instruction sheet is called nature. It's a set of laws, right, which science tries to discover, of how things work. You see, now, science does not know why it works that way. For instance, okay, let's say there's a protein that has a certain shape, and the law is that a protein, which is a chemical, that has a certain shape, if it connects to a cell, whatever, right, you know, it will do something to that cell. Why? I mean, a person can say, I understand what it does, I can measure the quantities, I can measure the protein, how it approaches, when it approaches, and so on. But why does this configuration of the protein, let's say, achieve that particular task or that particular result or effect? Unknown. We don't know the why of anything. The most we can discover is the what happens, and then connect it to something, right, that seemingly is the reason or the deterministic, is the determinant. Yeah, but in what way, or how does this determine what it does and what operation it achieves? Unknown. Science can never answer why. You know, they can determine the cause based on what's called a relationship. In other words, every time you see A will always produce B. Yeah, but why does this in A produce this in B? Unknown. You see? And the answer in this, what the Ramchal is saying, Kabbalistically, is because the reason why A always produces B is because the Malach, that's his instructions. He's the one that makes A do B. You see? Now, is there something intrinsic in A doing B? No. Those are the instructions of the Malach, that A will always do B. And the Malach interacts with the spiritual configuration of that physical object and make it happen. You see? It's just a matter of following instructions. And that's consistent. You see? The Malach will never deviate from his instruction sheet. You see? At all. The only time that God will, there's only two ways a Malach can deviate from that instruction sheet. One is what's called a miracle, where God decrees, for whatever reason, and it's always connected to the ultimate tikkun hakloli, which is the ultimate rectification, where God will say, well, I'm sorry, but I'm going to make a miracle now, which means that you now must deviate from your instruction sheet. You see? But so what? There's no why in the instruction sheet why A has to do B. You see? It could have meant that A would not do B, do C. But the Malach's instructions that A will always do B. So therefore, there's no difficulty in changing the instruction sheet. Now we call it a miracle, right? Because whenever we observe A, it always does B. That becomes nature. But there's nothing inherent in A that does B except to the instruction sheet. You see? So a miracle is identical to any other behavior. The problem is, or what differentiates them, is the miracle never happens. It's always A doing B. It's always the instruction sheet. You see? So if A does B, then we call that nature, the physical laws of the universe. You see? But if God decides, he can decree, of course, right, that A, I don't want you to do that. A will not do B, it will do C. But again, it's not because it's not possible. It just, what makes A do B all the time is the instruction sheet of the Malach. So therefore, what's the big deal? If you are able to tell the Malach not to do B, guess what? He won't do B. He'll do C. You see? And that's what a ness is. A ness operates a miracle operates the exact same way as nature. No difference. Except one is continuous and the other happens rarely, once in a while, you know? And of course there are many miracles, you know, that have occurred and so on, you know? I mean, take Kriyas Yamsuf, when the sea split, the splitting of the Red Sea, right, by Egypt, right? Excuse me. How in the waters, how in the world do waters stand up and become a whole bunch of different walls? The Medrash says that you can grow fruit. Fruit came out of them so the Jewish people could eat on their way through the Red Sea. It was like, you know, it was a complete abandonment of nature.
Avram winning the war.
What?
It was an incredible miracle.
Yeah, how can 318 men against 4 kingdoms? Well, yeah, it was by the way, it was a world war. We're not talking here about some local riffraff making some commotion here, right? We're talking about a world war. It was like half the planet against the other half of the planet, you know? So he went with 318 people, and that was it. But, you know, he took the soil. That's what Avram did. He took soil, and he just threw it, and all the soil became arrows. Talk about innovation in military, hardware. It's incredible. And of course, the beauty of it is all you had to take the soil, and just throw it. You didn't even have to aim it. Each one, it was called smart arrows, They all know exactly where to go and who to kill. And that was it, The whole thing is ness. It's unheard of, right? And of course, 318 is Gematria Eliezer. So all he did was him and Eliezer took on half the planet. I mean, it's impossible, But again, what's the big deal? You see, the Malach decided that if you take the soil, it'll turn into an arrow. He said, and it did, and he killed everybody, No big deal.
It says that he was Semach and Nisan by bringing Eliezer. If he didn't have Eliezer, then it would be an open maze.
Yeah. So the fact that there was one other guy there somehow alleviated the problem. Anyway.
The punishment of Golos because he had that lack of bitachon that he brought Eliezer with him.
Well, whatever. Anyway, so basically that's what a miracle is. A miracle is merely a deviation of the instruction sheet of the Malach. It's a very important idea, and that's how it works. So that's a system that God uses. The question we can ask, which is we can ask many times, why does God need Malachim for? Him do it himself. It's no problem for Moshe to do what he has to do, but in many ways that's unknown. The Moshe does not want to come across what's called openly, blatantly, and exposed. The Moshe hides behind everything, and a Malach who is an agent of God is a concealment factor. God is able to, what's called a cloaking device. He's able to hide who and what he is and so on, and he has what's called agents or representatives that do his bidding.
You see? The Exodus says, I took you out.
In a certain sense, that's right. But anyway, so this is therefore the whole concept of the Hashgacha, is that the Baruch Hashem runs the world through Malachim. That's what they are for. Like I said, the existence of an object is because of the spheres, the divine emanations that create and sustain, you see. But the actual operation of everything is from the Malachim itself. And the Baruch Hashem really runs the world that way, through the Malachim. Now, what he does, they are, no, they are also from the spheres, yeah. Everything is from the spheres, correct. That's right. So they are created and so on, but their role in creation, Malachim, the angels, is to operate everything, you see. But it's even interesting that it's not like God says, or there's a Malach. No. He gives the order like a Malach. The Malach doesn't see God. How does he know what to do? Because all of a sudden, in his mind, the Malach's mind, right? All of a sudden, he hears a command in the mind. It just arises in his mind, and so on. And what arises, exactly what to do, right? Precisely what to do. And he is given, the exact energy to do it. Like, it's not that he has to eat breakfast to get it done. He doesn't have to take supplements for this. The energy arises at the same time as the idea, the knowledge. And therefore the actions can take place. So what the Baruch Hashem does is he doesn't command. There are many classes of Malachim. He commands what's called Malachim, which are very close to him, much higher in Madrega, in level, and that Malach commands another Malach, which commands another Malach. You see, it's like a whole chain of command here, and ultimately the lowest guy, he's the guy in charge of the physical object. He does the thing. So it's interesting that even in terms of his agents that conceal God, there's a whole chain of command. You see, that's how it works. So what we begin to realize is that, wait a minute, Hashem doesn't need any of this, you see? But obviously the whole thing is a device to conceal the presence of the Ribono Shel Olam. You see, he doesn't want to expose who he is, his awesome being and so on. So it's done with a whole series of malachim, one after the other, each one being instructed, finally gets down to the bottom, and that malach does what it has to do.
Is the koach, is the energy also handed down, or is that direct from HaKadosh Baruch Hu?
Everything is from the Moshe.
Not from, direct.
Direct, yeah.
Do the energies necessary come through the Hishtalshalos, or is you said the command that goes through?
No, the malach above that, right?
Gets the energy and passes it along?
No, he tells the malach above that directs and instructs the malach below, but so that's the idea. But the energy is from the Rebbeinu Shalom, you know. In any case, so this is the way the Rebbeinu Shalom runs the world, you see, and that is what he will do. So what we see is that existence in many ways is a step program. It has steps, you see, where A will cause B, B will cause C, D, and so on, you see. It's not an instant. God does not relate seemingly with the physical universe or even with the spiritual universe. He does not relate with it in a way where in any way you can experience him. It's all agents that instruct agents that instruct agents. Of course, all this happens obviously instantaneously and so on. And this is how it works. So that's an important distinction between what is a nes, a miracle, and what is natural or nature. They're really both the same. It all depends on what the instruction sheets say. Obviously, we can ask, well, why are these the natural laws? Why is there gravity? You know what I'm saying? Why is, why, how do bacteria thrive? Why? You know, and how does food work to give energy and whatever? Why are there cells, you know? All of this has profound understanding, and all of it is necessary for what's called the tikkun hakloli to be achieved, which is the ultimate rectification to be achieved. Now we don't know why. Like I once pointed out, you know, there are 300,000 species of beetles, if you remember that statement, you know? Yeah, like 7,000 species of ants. Not 7,000 ants, 7,000 different types of ants. You know, some guy says, yeah, they're all crawling in my backyard, right? You know, we don't know why. Like, what you mean if you had 6,999 species, wouldn't work? No, it wouldn't work. You see, why does a tiger look the way it does? It's a beautiful animal. You know what I'm saying? It's a magnificent beast and so on, you know. We don't know why, you know, and so on. We don't know almost 99.99% of what's out there. We don't know. We don't even know the concept of ecology, that the whole world must rest on everything else. There's no such thing as a thing which individually can survive. Everything depends on everything else in a way which is almost infinite. The intricacies involved of the relationships is beyond belief, you know, and there's a whole field of ecology that is trying to figure out, you know, and you know, and so on. If you allow this species not to exist, then all of a sudden you find other things won't exist and so on. You know, we're just trying to figure it all out, you know, but it's an incredible, complex, intricate design. And all of it is to allow the tikkun hakloli to occur, what's called the rectification to occur. You see, so we really have no idea. And once I told you about this system, what's important to know is that's the concept of what magic is. Magic. It's called white magic, okay? And what that is that what the Hashem also gave is powers in divine names. There are different shemus, okay, that if you pronounce them in the right way and so on, then you can actually direct the malach that is directing whatever physical object he's assigned to. You see, the Hashem gave the power of that Shem, right, to actually instruct the malach to deviate from his assignment, you see, and therefore what that malach can do, right? He does what you asked him to. You see? Which is a change of nature. So if you want to levitate this cup, for instance, right? Guys want to see it done? No. Anyway, imagine you utter Hashem, a divine name, right? And it directs the malach who's making sure that this cup will not fly off somewhere, right? It's stuck to the table, right? All of a sudden, the cup levitates. You see? So the question, wait a minute. Naturally, it can't do that, so how's it happening? And the answer is because you went around it. In other words, here's the story, right? You can get this cup to move one of two ways. Either you can pick it up, and that's natural, right? Or you can meditate on the divine name, and therefore that will now instruct the malach that keeps this cup planted on the table. He will now levitate or raise the cup in defiance of gravity. That's white magic, and there's a whole system of this stuff. Shemus now, they're written and so on and so forth. Some people call it Kabbalistic magic. It's really Kabbalistic and so on, and so on. And it's not kishuf.
You're allowed to do that type of
Yes. Yeah.
Not wild magic.
I'll explain it. Yeah. So, and when you find, for instance, there's a Shem, whatever that is, or a series of Shems, right, that can impart life to inanimate object. See, which is astounding. Like the Goylem, the famous, whatever, if the Maral made a Goylem, whatever, and so on, right? He put into his mouth, whatever, a Shem, and it animated the Goylem. You know what I'm saying? It's very interesting. Sometimes it's hard to distinguish which people are animated by Shemus and which because they're really truly dead, and which people know what they're doing. They're living, like I said, that. But in
they do all that.
Well, yeah.
Really, they think for themselves.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. You mean AI, artificial intelligence, and so on. But the main idea is that this exists. The Baruch Hashem created the ability to change the instruction sheet of a malach, and that is called white magic. However, what's interesting is that there's a thing called black magic. What's that? Black magic is when you also use shemus or different vehicles and so on, right? But what it does is it changes the instruction sheet of the malach by asking beings that are tamei, that are evil, and so on, that they should influence the instruction sheets, you see. So in essence, it always starts with the malach deviating from his instruction sheet, you see. But the way it works is that you're not bringing down, you see, what you really do is when you say the Shem, the divine name or whatever, what that does is it brings out a force, an energy from God himself, from the spheres, right? And that force appears to the malach and tells him change. But the energy or the directive, so to speak, comes from kedusha, comes from holiness. You see? So that's one thing, and we find many people in the Gemara did that, A lot of famous stories, but one of them was where they used to create a calf every Erev Shabbos. You know what I'm saying? Talk about beating the inflation, right? They used to make a calf, and how'd they do it? Because they knew the Shem that would direct, right, the energy or the force that could create life, and the malach had to do it, so they would animate some type of being, and they ate it. You know what I'm saying? Talk about getting a spiritual high. You know what I'm saying? When they ate the calf, I don't think it was a normal experience. But anyway, but if you employ the energy of the beings of evil, like the Sot, whatever, and they produce the energy, which of course ultimately comes from God, but they are producing the energy that they have to direct the malach, right, the angel, to change the instruction sheet, then what you are doing is you are tapping into the side of evil in order to accomplish magic. That's called black magic. And that's very bad, because by using using or utilizing the forces of evil, you become attached to them. And they have a claim over you, which is obviously not very healthy, and so on. And therefore, it's bad news, like I said,
How do you know which angels, white or black, you're accessing?
Well,
Different names?
that's all part of the chokhmah. That's all part of the wisdom. You have to know, who you're accessing, how to access them, what the conditions are, and when to stop. You know what I'm saying? You can't. It's nothing to play around with. Obviously, these are very powerful forces.
You're accessing Metatron.
The what?
When you sing Mazel Tov to somebody, there's a Malach, Metatron, who has an exact ledger of Mazel, which will outweigh something good instead of something bad.
Yeah.
So,
without going into the details and so on, I'm just
you don't need those Malachim.
Well, no. There's always a Malach that does it. The question is how to direct him and so on. So you can do it one of two ways. Anyway, so this is the result of the fact that there's an instruction sheet, right? That always is able to, the Malach reads, and he can deviate from that. You see, and they know how to do that, and that's how miracles occur throughout the entire creation, and so on, But the main idea is that this is a basic operational system that the Hashem employs by the whole concept of the spiritual counterpart. Then you have the concept of malachim, then the concept of the spheres, and so on. But in the end, ultimately, the Hashem is able to conceal himself. We don't see him. Nobody knows who he is, where he is. They just know there he is. It arises in their consciousness, if you want to use that as an example, you see. And that's basically how the hashpah, or the hashgocha itself, you see. Yeah. Now what's important also to know, what the Ramchal says, is that a malach cannot deviate. It's not like he could say, well, today I'm going to change, I'm going to change things. He can't do that. In other words, the malach himself is chained, so to speak, to his post. He can never deviate from what he is supposed to do, and that's his tachlis. That's his purpose.
What about a human malach? Like, kind of like he went to be the prime minister.
Well, if a person becomes a malach, which is possible, Chanoich became a malach, whatever.
Does he have the bechira?
Yes, there are the higher class of malachim do have free will, and what they do is variable. You see, there are certain malachim that are much way higher on the scale, the ladder, whatever, Gavriel, Michal, and so on and so forth, that their behavior is incredibly flexible. They can be assigned different tasks. You see, the lower class malachim, that's it. That's their assignment, and that's what they have to do. You see, and anyway, so the first way I mentioned is how a malach can change, right? Is through there's a gzera, a decree from God that they have to change their behavior. That's called a miracle. You see. Then there are other things, because if you think about it, there are malachim for everything. For instance, there's a malach that is in charge of trees. Each individual tree or whatever, right, is instructed to grow. But what happens if the Hashem is now sending a hurricane? Who's going to win? See, so the malach that wants the tree to stay put, that's his job, right? And then all of a sudden, the Hashem commands the malach of the wind, right, to uproot the tree. So all of a sudden, that malach is pushed aside. You see, so the Hashem. So what we begin to realize is that the entire world is malachim being pitted against other malachim. So all of a sudden, they have to change what they're doing, because the decree now is that the tornado has to now come and violate nature. You see, but they themselves operated in a certain nature, you see. So in many ways, the job of a malach can be suspended or superseded, you see, by another malach who now has what's called the command to do this.
Are they taken by surprise, these ones, when they have tornado hits? Or they have...
I mean, are they warned?
Are they warned? They have full-knowledge that they're going to be suspended?
I'm sure that they are warned with ample time to get ready, to brace themselves.
Sounds
Right.
like a big game of rock, break, scissors.
Of who?
You know rock, break, scissors? You know.
No. Not aware of the game, you know. But obviously, because changes are always occurring, it's an infinite system. It's an infinite system. Go figure out, and so on, But obviously, it's run with incredible precision. Don't think because there's just so many things to do, It's run with obviously incredible precision. How this works and when it works and so on, But the obviously one malach can be nullified in terms of what it does, in order to allow another malach to come through. You see that especially with the weather, but you really see it in everything, and so on. And therefore that's how it works, in terms of like I say. But all of it is decreed basically in order to do the tikkun and so on, Anyway, yeah.
You talked about a chain of command descending.
Yes.
How about going the other way? When you pray, are you talking directly to God, or you have to go to a chain of command?
Well, ultimately, when you pray, you are talking directly to God. Yeah. I mentioned a long time ago when I was talking about this topic that man who has free will, right, can initiate the movement. Nature will determine that the physical laws of the universe and so on, that they must happen. But a person has free will, you see. All animals are controlled from the malach to them. No animal has free will, you see. So an animal will follow its nature. That nature is determined by the malach that controls it. And that's what animal does. It can be stopped, remember? And when Daniel, right, was thrown into a pit of hungry lions, whatever, and they just sat there and looked at him. Now that's impossible. We know that because they had been starved for whatever period of time. And believe me, the last place you want to be in is a pit with hungry lions and looking at you for dinner. You know what I'm saying? But they didn't do anything. And of course, whatever, Nuchanetz or whatever, right? So what's going on here, So he took one guy and threw him in, and of course he was devoured immediately, whatever, that was a nest. It's a nest nigla. You see what I'm saying? So that's a miracle that occurs, you know what I'm saying? And so on, But where's I going with this? Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. But so therefore, animals are completely in the control of the malachim that control them. However, man, that's called isarusa de elo. The movement begins from on high. You see, that's true of all beings that have no free will. However, if you have free will, then there's a movement from below called isarusa de tato. Means since you have free will, you can actually determine what you want to do. You see, and then your spiritual entity, right, configures itself to you, and the malach allows you to determine what happens to you. There's no instruction sheet, you see, or I should say the instruction sheet says that this individual wants to do something, backs off. So only a human being that has free will can do that, where the movement from below is initiated from the individual himself, not the malach. And then the malach has to back off, you see, and allow you to do whatever you want, you see. And that's the concept of free will. Okay? You really can initiate the entire movement. That's what free will does. And therefore the instruction sheet is held, it's on hold, so to speak, So it's really working both ways. both ways, you see. So you are controlled, A, and B, you are independent of that control. So that's what happens in that case, you know. And so movement from above and movement from below and so on, you know.
Rabbi said, was his malach. Everyone has their own malach?
Yes.
One malach, right?
Yes. No, that's different. That's a malach, you know, that isn't instructing you in any or controlling you. That's a malach, right, that oversees you many ways and tries to defend you. Because that's another discussion which we're going to talk about, is the courts in heaven, what's called the heavenly tribunals. You see, so each malach, each person has a malach assigned to him, you see, and that malach is assigned for your well-being. What was that?
The defense attorney.
Yeah, it's an assignment, but it's interesting. Not only each person has a malach, each nation collectively has one malach. You see, or whatever they are, you know, and so on, and they defend the nation. And you've seen the Gemara many times, you know, like when Egypt was, you know, about to go under with the splitting of the Red Sea. So the Malach of Egypt, all of a sudden there was an enormous court case, and the Malach of Mitzrayim defended Egypt, and so on. Of course, he was overruled, thank God.
He didn't go to Harvard Law.
No, he didn't go to Harvard Law. Well, I'll tell you something. He didn't have to go to Harvard Law. He knew exactly what to say. The problem is that, you know, the decree was that, nope, the Jews got to be saved because they're going to receive the Torah, and as a result of that, they will initiate the whole tikkun, you know. No, a malach does not have to go to law school at all, you know. He's a lawyer, and not only that, he practices license he practices law without a license, you know. So that's really interesting and so, you know. But they know intuitively, you know, not that they know, you have to understand, it's not that they know what to say. The knowledge of what to say is placed in their mind by God. You see, it's not that they're brilliant individuals, malachim, and they know exactly how to defend. No, they don't know anything. Nobody knows anything. Everything is from God. But what the Hashem wants is that they should defend their nation. And it's amazing. The Hashem acts as if, you know, he's the king and all that, but like, you know, you testify and then you testify, you know, as if the Hashem, he knows everything that's going to be, you know. So he acts as if he doesn't know, or actually as if there's leeway what to do. You see? So you got all these malachim testifying and arguing the case and so on, you know. So it's not that they know, they are given the knowledge that they have to defend their client. Let's call it their client, you know. The only thing what's interesting about this, you know, it's called pro bono work. They don't charge. Malachim don't charge to defend you. Isn't that amazing? You know, not to charge, it's astounding, you know. And they're much better at it than the lawyers, believe me, you know, and so on, you know. But this is what they do. That's a whole host of malachim. That's called your mazel, you see, you know. But in any case...
How are we supposed to approach this if the truth is that behind the scenes, at the deepest levels, Hashem is really orchestrating everything?
Yeah, it's like puppets almost. Except puppets don't know that they're puppets.
But when you have what the truth is, so obviously Hashem is not just making a charade. So even though in essence it really is, but at the same time it is a reality. So how are we supposed to kind of live in the reality of the court and just have in the back of our minds that it's all Hashem? Or what is our focus supposed to be?
Our focus is that, like I say, the hester means, the concealment means that we run the show. We can do whatever we want, you know. But the emunah is, the understanding and the belief and the faith is that Eino Mavadoi. Nothing really happens. It's all about God, you see. So really, in the end, it's all about the Baruch Hashem. But the way it acts is as if, you know, we have, you know, there's God and there's malachim to defend and accuse and all that kind of information, you know. That's the way it looks, as far as we're concerned. But deep down, we have to understand that there is no other power than God. In fact, there is no information other than what God provides, and it goes on all the time. That's what we have to believe and so on,
If there was a car crash, there was a court case in heaven?
Yes, of course. Of course. Nothing happens without a court case. Nothing. It's impossible,
And taking the words to its logical conclusion, when we have our free will, and our thoughts develop, and we do action, the chain of command, the thought, picking up my keys, walking to my car, every step, malachim, is the chain of command is taking place. Every step of the way from my thought, I'm going to go leave the share, pick up my keys, walk to my car. Is that also a chain of command of malachim?
Well, the malachim are enabling you to operate. That you're able to walk over and, do whatever you want, But the thought itself, is free will. Nobody puts that thought into your mind.
After
That's not.
in a scientific way, my mind, my neurons fire. I'm standing up.
Yeah, okay.
My eyes are functioning. I'm walking around.
Yeah.
Is every step so deep that malachim are
The operation
like
that...
every new electron?
Yeah, the operation that you do is controlled by the malachim. But you have free will that you determine what they will do. That's what free will. But it still has to operate. That's the system that God uses to operate. You see, that you initiate the movement through free will. But then the counterpart reflects exactly your movement in heaven. You see, and the malachim have to stand back and allow you to initiate the movement. You know what I'm saying? But the movement itself, in a certain sense, is done through the malach.
The person experiences arthritis. He can't move so easy.
Same thing.
Same thing.
The thing is, you have to remember,
there, whatever.
the thing that the speed of this is, we cannot calculate the speed of this interaction. Your interaction with a malach, and his interaction with your spiritual counterpart, we're talking about a speed of nanoseconds. It's not even nanoseconds, The speed is almost instantaneous. So how does this work, It's the old story. How can there be a judgment to heaven? You know what I'm saying? It's instantaneous that the judgment in heaven will happen in an instant in time. Because remember, if it's a judgment in heaven, then there are prosecutors and there are defense attorneys. Yeah, there are witnesses being heard. This takes time. I mean, in America, it takes decades for a case to come into a court, right? So, but in Shemayim, a court case will be instant. We don't know how that works. You see? It's got to be instant. It can't be, take years and years to go through the system.
Can we say it's outside of time?
No, everything is in time.
During our time?
It's within our time, but it's
go quicker.
Whatever it is, we don't know how. Remember, there are trillions of court cases happening at any given second. Why? Because everybody is being judged and supervised. Everybody, the whole human race. There are 7.7 billion people already, right? And they are being evaluated and judged every day. You know what I'm saying? In terms of what's going to happen to them. You know how many courts you have to judge 7.7 billion people every day? Wait. To be judged them every single day? You know how many courts and how long it takes? And, obviously it's a system that happens with speed of light. Instantly, everybody knows exactly what to do. Everybody's testified and so on. We have no comprehension in terms of the speed of what goes on and so on. But in some way, it has to match our rate of time. Has to match it, obviously, Sure. We don't know. We can only describe this in a very superficial way. And what really happens up there is beyond our... Look, there are hundreds of billions of malachim up there. You know what I'm saying? And they're all doing something. So how do you comprehend the kingdom that are hundreds of billions of malachim and agents, each thing assigned to every human, every molecule. It's just beyond comprehension. Yet the Rebbe Hashem is on top of it all. He's on top of everything. You see? And so on, So therefore, all of this is basically just a description, right, of something that we really can describe it superficially, but we have no idea, what all this is, and so on,
Near-death experiences, and everybody says that they're in actual court, in front of 3 judges from whoever was from that door. So there's an actual court case. It's not,
there is. Oh yeah,
so
sure.
Are the deceased relatives there to defend you? Is that the way
Are the
it works?
deceased relatives there?
To defend you?
No, I don't think so. No. Which we're going to talk about, you don't realize something, but every act you do, whether it be thinking, speaking, or doing, right, creates a malach of that particular action. You actually create, that's what it says, anybody in Pirkei Avos, you do a mitzvah, you create a malach that is a senega, testifies. Now that malach is what? How do you create a being? You actually created a being from your act, which is astounding. So therefore, when you look at that being, he's an exact reflection of what you created. That's why, what do? You're finished. That witness is the perfect witness. It's not a witness that heard what you did or saw what you did. That witness is what you did. Right? So how do you beat that? You don't. You see? There's no, I saw it, I'm not sure about it, or that whistleblower hearsay, which is absolutely insane. How hearsay can be committed, considered anything, But that malach is your act, existentially. That's what kind of witnesses they bring. That's not a bad, way to run a court and so on, But in any case, so this is fundamentally what the idea is and how it works, And look, I will continue next week,
What's these?
By the way, 9 o'clock, Yeah, go ahead.
We talked about the white magic is
Yeah.
dangerous.
White magic, yes, can be dangerous.
What are the parameters about dangerous?
What are the parameters?
How is it dangerous?
It's dangerous in this way, because malachim don't like to be shoved aside. They're very sensitive, you see? And essentially what you're doing is saying, stop your job. I mean, that's what he's assigned to. Stop your job and do what I want. Forget about what you're assigned to. They don't like that, you see? So you've angered them, so to speak. And if you don't know what you're doing, or you made a mistake, or whatever, it's very easy to make a mistake and so on and so forth. They will come after you. They will now have a new assignment, and that's to get you, and so on. And you don't want that. I once told you a story of the Baal Shem Tov was doing something together with somebody else, and all of a sudden the Baal Shem Tov said to the other person, it was in the middle of the night, he says, we made the wrong turn. We did something wrong, and they were doing something in Shemayim, and he said, listen, don't shut your eyes. If you go to sleep, we're finished. So they had to stay up the whole night, and right before dawn, this other guy, he was so tired, he just closed his eyes, for whatever, and for a minute or two, he was dead. Because obviously they had provoked the malach, or whatever they were trying to arouse and alert, made a mistake, and he paid for it with his life. Baal Shem Tov didn't fall asleep, so he survived. You have to be very careful, because they get angry, because they don't want to be disturbed on what their task is. So, you have to know what you're doing exactly. And also you have to be a great person. You have to have merits. Who are you to interfere with my job? That's what the thought is,
Right, because it comes from Hashem.
Of course. The assignment comes from the Baruch Shalom. So who are you to tell me to do something? It happens to be that you know how to do it. you know what to do. But that doesn't give you the merit to do it. So they are extremely particular. That's why you have to be very careful, you know. By the way, there are Sfarim I once mentioned that tell you exactly how to do these things, what shemus to use, and what parchment to write it on, deer parchment, cow parchment, whatever, and it tells you what to do. It's interesting, there are shemus where you could disappear, there are shemus where you can travel anywhere instantly, there are shemus that you can get cured from any disease. There are all kinds of shemus, you know, and there's farm on that. I tell you what to do, but then there's shemus, for instance, sheilas chalom. You know, if you know what to do, you know, you can ask a question to malachim, whatever. What's the story up there? You know, when do I win the lottery? Right? And the malachim answer you. You will never win the lottery. Whatever, right? Bad news, you know. That's called sheilas chalom.
Is black magic a lost science, call it?
It's what?
Black magic, has that been lost from mankind? Black magic, is that lost?
Basically, it has been lost, yeah. The Egyptians knew it. They were good at it, you know. Well, the most famous magician was Bilam. Yeah, he had it down to a science, probably. And same thing with Lovin. Lovin was Lovin was probably greater than Bilam in his ability to do magic.
They were the same, I think.
Bilam is the Gilgul of love.
Yeah, whatever, without going into who's who, you know, or it was the grandson of Lovin, whatever. But Lovin was an arch magician of black magic, you know, and then Bilam probably learned from him and so on, you know. That's why he was a dangerous man. I mean, that's why he said to Yaakov, I can kill all of you. Remember he said that? He chased Yaakov when Yaakov ran away and so on and so forth, you know. He was very powerful. See, so that the Torah brings these people down.
It is lost today. Today we can assume it's a lost knowledge.
Basically, yeah. There's probably still a remnant of it, like there isn't anything. Like even astrology, for instance, right? The Egyptians were very good in astrology. They, you know, but the problem, you know, but today most of the knowledge in astrology is confined to the newspapers. Yeah, you know, but there is a certain, it's interesting. Sometimes you read remember your astrological sign, and it corresponds. You know what I'm saying? It actually makes a little sense, you know. So there is a chokhmah of astrology, but it's, what?
Cannibals in Africa, you know, with the dolls, they stick the doll.
You mean voodoo? Voodoo.
Could there be something to that?
The Haitians? Yeah, maybe, yeah. They stick you with the, you know.
Human beings have an experience where when they sleep, their physicality is like limited, and their dreams are beyond time and space. You could be all over the place and jump from time periods.
Yeah, of course. It's not restricted by time or space, yeah.
Yeah, so in that sense...
well, that's one. There are different ways that we can access kedusha. There are different ways. One is Gil Eliyahu, revelation from Eliyahu. Another one is Sheilas Cholam. There are people who know today how to do it. How you can ask a question, and you ask them malachim, and they will answer you in a dream, right? That doesn't mean everybody dreams of malachim. You know, what about, you know, sane people here, you know, and so on, you know. But Sheilas Chacham is one of the ways, you know, of accessing, you know, information outside of the system, as they say, you know.
What is that in
but anyway, Sheilas Cholam means to ask a question in a dream. That's what it means. And you get the answer in the dream. No, you don't ask it in the dream, you ask it before you go to sleep. But you will get that dream that answers your question. There's Ruach HaKodesh. There are different ways that the Baruch Hashem can instruct you about, you know, what's going to happen and so on, you know.
The Beis Yosef request?
That's a Magid, yeah. That's another way.
Well, he was just
I don't recall, but he certainly had it. He wrote a whole sefer from him, you know. That's a Magid. Ramchal had a Magid. You know, Magid speaks through your voice, and all of a sudden you wound up talking, and you're not in control of your voice. It's the mazik, it's the magid employing your vocal cords to be able to talk to you. You see, so that and there are people who have a magid. You know what I'm saying? So I say sheilas chacham, sheilas chaloim, making a request and being answered in the dream. You have Ruach HaKodesh, you have a magid, you have Giliyo, and so on. There are ways that are still available to people today. Not that you want to use it and so on.
Sometimes you don't know which decision, what to decide, so you sleep on it, and then the next day you know which way you're going to go.
That's different. That's because the unconscious mind has been working on it the whole night. See, we don't shut off our minds. Our brains are very active even when we sleep, collecting the data that we assembled during the day, all that kind of stuff, you see. And many times the unconscious mind is actually thinking about what you thought about, whatever problem, and all of a sudden you wake up and there it is. You have the answer.
Getting out of your own way.
Getting out of what?
Getting out of your own way.
Getting out of your own way, yeah. It's like, hey, go to sleep. We'll tell you. We'll let you know what the story is, But that's teva. That's nature. That's natural.
Is the girl like raw?
I was just about
you to action?
Yes, that's another. No, but that's not kedusha. That's segulus. That's goyrolus. That's not. I'm talking about accessing kedusha. To ask a malach be answered in a dream, or Gil Eliyahu to have the revelation of Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah,
my brother
right?
used to go and it works. It's astounding.
Well, okay,
There's a book,
and then you go,
and then
7, whatever the whole process is,
And that works with more hashgacha pratis.
What's it?
Whatever page you turn to in the Tanakh, whatever.
Well, it's the Torah, and then you count every. I forgot how it works. Every 7th chapter, every 7th word, whatever it is. But that's called a segula. It's not an access to kedusha. These things are accesses to actually spiritual beings or spiritual forces and so on. That's a different level.